but it would be better for us to get underway so we can make some time on this tonight. So with that, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Would all of you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now we'll have a roll call. It's under the cookie crumbs.
Eva Henry. Bill Holen. Elise Jones. Dennis McCloskey.
Here.
Tim Mock. Michael Hancock. Paul Ryan. Chris Nevitt. Robin Kniech. Jack Hilbert. Connie McLean. Don Rozier. Rachel Zenzinger. Bob Roth. Sue Horn. David Spellman. Casey Becker. Ann Justin. Cynthia Martinez. Paul Donahue. Clark Hamelman. Kathy Noon. Ron Engels. Tom Riley. Doug Tisdale. Gail Christie. Jim Benson. Jason McEldowney. Michael Ayers. Joe Baker. Todd Riddle. Laura Keegan. Mike Spees. Randy Penn. Here. Mark Gruber.
Here.
Joyce Thomas. Here. George Heath. Jennifer Weinberger. Lisa Jones. Bob Easton. Amy Shears. Here. Henry Ergott. Matthew Skeen. Paula Bovo. Here. Marjorie Sloan. Bob Vermeulen. Here. Ron Rakowski. Here. Jack Morgan. Christine Berg. Stacy Luberger. Adam Paul. Here. Jim Taylor. Jackie Millay. Here. Katie Witt. Here. Hank Dalton. Here. Julie Van Dommelen. Here. Ursula Morgan. Here. Chris Wolf. Here. Joe Gerlach. Here. Joyce Downing. Carol Dodge. John Diak. Here. Cliff Mueller. Here. Fred Lissy. Deborah Williams. Sandy Pennington. Val Vigil. Here. Nancy McNally. Here. Joyce J. Here. Doug Young. Andrew Friedman. Deborah Perkins Smith. Here. And we're done.
Okay, thank you. I think by listening to the names going around the table, I know that tonight, you know that the new members and alternates that have been present on the list, we realized that there was a third of the county commissioners are new after this election as a result of term limits, and tonight we find the same thing here. We have Eva Henry from Adams County, Bill Holen from Arapahoe County, Tom Hayden from Clear Creek as an alternate, Bob Roth from Aurora, Rennie Peterson from Aurora will be that alternate. Elise Jones is here tonight, Boulder County member. Tom Quinn of Lakewood will be an alternate. And John Diak will be a member from Parker. And I'm sure you'll correct me. If you have a name like mine, I've heard it mispronounced many different ways, even by relatives, you know. So imagine how that goes. So with that, we'll get underway tonight. Have a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
Okay, agenda's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? Okay. The first thing we have on our list tonight is going to be a public hearing. While you were being seated, you also had gotten 3 different copies of information for other groups that are in support of this public hearing. You can add that document to those kinds of things we will consider as part of the public record. So calling this public hearing to order. Good evening. I'm Dennis McCloskey, Chair of the Denver Regional Council of Governments. I thank you all for coming. This evening, the Denver Regional Council of Governments is holding a public hearing on proposed amendments to 2 DRCOG regional plans. These include the MetroVision 2035 plan and the 2035 MetroVision Regional Transportation Plan. It's along with the companion air quality conformity determination documents. The public hearing of the Denver Regional Council of Governments is hereby convened. In its role as the Regional Planning Commission, DRCOG is responsible for the preparation of plan elements that together constitute our regional plan. The items being considered tonight were developed through DRCOG's 2012 Cycle 2 MetroVision Plan Assessment process. The purpose of this hearing is to provide an opportunity for all who are interested in the proposed amendments to provide comments to the board. Receiving these public comments is important to the board's decision-making process. Anyone wishing to speak should register on the sign-in sheets, and I have 2 sheets that have been brought up to me. They were in the reception area earlier, or should have previously made a request to speak through the DRCOG website or by phone. Any comment received via email, website, or in writing are automatically included in this public hearing record. Any received prior to this meeting will have been provided to the board prior to this meeting. If you wish to submit written testimony to be included in that official recording of this hearing this evening, please give it to the secretary after you speak. Board members are free to ask questions of those that are testifying. Brad Calvert and Fred Sandell, our DRCOG staff, will now summarize the proposed amendments and the results of the air quality conformity determination. This will be a combined presentation. Because we have just recently received the revisions to the HOV change event triggers mentioned by Mr. Sandell, I'm extending that public comment period on that item only until February 20th, 2013, at which time the public hearing will be reconvened. Tonight's hearing is now open for those who have signed up to speak on those proposed amendments. Please identify which of the specific amendments you're commenting on. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to testify. If you've not finished by the end of 3 minutes, I'll ask you to conclude your remarks. When you hear your name called, please approach the microphone area and present your testimony. Any final questions from any of the board members? Okay, we'll go ahead with the presentation first.
Good evening. Tonight we are hearing public comment on amendments to the 2035 MetroVision Plan and the MetroVision Regional Transportation Plan. I'll begin with amendments to the Regional Transportation Plan. With regard to rapid transit, what's shown here are locations with portions of fast track corridors that are delayed beyond the 2035 fiscal constraint. With regard to roadway amendments, we have a policy change for minimum toll-free occupancy. And the locations shown here are HOV toll managed lanes within the current fiscally constrained regional transportation plan for which this policy change applies. Now, as was mentioned, there is a revision to this toll-free policy amendment. And there is a handout that you should have received earlier this evening that includes some refinements to the change event triggers, which are based on transit vehicle delays, speeds, and HOV 2+ volumes within the managed lanes. Another change here is that if none of those specific triggers are met, there is a proposal before the Transportation Commission that this change would occur beginning in January 2017. Also want to note that there are no impacts to air quality conformity with this revision. All the network changes that have been proposed to the regional transportation have been modeled, and they pass all emissions tests for regional air quality conformity. Also wanted you to be aware that with this amendment cycle, we have revised 25-year growth estimates for the region, and these new growth estimates show population and employment growth at less than what had been estimated previously, although these numbers do show about a 40% increase in growth within the region of between 2010 and 2035. And I'll turn it over to Brad.
I'm going to cover the proposed amendments as part of the growth and development portion of MetroVision 2035. You sort of have two types of proposals here, those that require board action and those that are administrative changes that no board action is required. This document, which defines and describes the proposed amendments, has been available online, has been linked to in the board packet. The one thing that, so I'm going to give the highlights of these, but the one thing that I would note is that the MetroVision Issues Committee has seen all of these proposals and made recommendations to the board that the board will see when you consider these for action at a later date. We did have a proposed policy amendment on the within the extent of urban development section of MetroVision that was proposed by Boulder County. You have hopefully 3 sets of written comments that were received today in relation to this policy amendment. So basically what you're looking at is the amended text to an existing policy number 6, adding those words in orange towards the end, and high wildfire hazard zones, and then an entirely new policy that would be included within this portion of the MetroVision plan. We also had several proposals related to urban centers that are recognized within MetroVision, 13 proposals for new urban centers, 3 major revisions to existing urban centers. The Growth and Development Supplement adopted by the board in January of last year stipulates that in consultation with DRCOG's staff, local governments may choose to do major revisions to urban centers such that major changes to boundaries or major changes to assumptions about population and employment. And if in consultation with staff it's determined to be a significant enough change, it ultimately warrants policy level review, so it gets treated the same as a new urban center. So those 2 are the ones that do require board action. And then somewhat related to that, we also have 11 minor revisions to existing urban centers, which are, of course, minor boundary changes and minor revisions to assumptions about population and employment. So again, there is no board action associated with those minor revisions. Other administrative changes, 2 related to UGB or UGA. Adams County is committing 160 acres of urban growth area under the flexibility provisions adopted by the board. This is something that they can do administratively in consultation with DRCOG. Jefferson County is switching from an urban growth boundary community to an urban growth area community. And also Douglas County has asked us to remove a 640-acre parcel shown in our current parks and open space map. This is not a map that's adopted by the board, but it does appear in the plan for context. So there's no board action required, but we just thought we would let you know. And that is it for the growth and development portion.
Thank you, Brad and Fred. Are there any other names to be brought forward? Okay, we have 3 names of folks who would like to speak at this public hearing. First on the list is Jim Webster from Boulder County. Jim, you have that 3-minute time period, and Connie here will be the timekeeper.
So I'm here to speak on the wildfire policy amendment to MetroVision 2035. Again, my name is Jim Webster, and I'm the Boulder County Community Wildfire Protection Planner. Timing is everything. We can all recall times when this maxim rang true. However, today I'm hoping that common sense trumps good timing. Last winter, Boulder County submitted this wildfire amendment during the Cycle 1 amendment process. If we had proceeded according to schedule, we'd been making these comments last summer. And with smoke in the air, I believe we would have received widespread support for this amendment and probably even attempts to strengthen it. As I come before you now in the middle of winter, when even the Fern Lake fire is taking a rest, I hope you have some good memories, because I want you to take a minute and try to recall what transpired last summer and in 2010. Remember the communities that were impacted. And if you were spared, think of what your lives would be like if your community had been severely impacted by wildfire. Boulder County has experience with this issue. We learned the hard way. Now we want to share the lessons we learned with the region. This past year, we've reached out to help Jefferson, Larimer, and El Paso counties. We have sponsored programs with our counterparts examining research that shows that increasing temperatures and longer fire seasons are leading to more frequent, larger, and more severe wildfires. So this amendment is necessary because the World Wildfire doesn't appear in the Metro Vision 2035 plan. The question is not if, but when the next catastrophic wildfire will occur. Large wildfires are a regional, not a local issue. Fire doesn't recognize political boundaries. Local officials need to work together on this issue. It has a significant impact on our quality of life. So our vision of the future is incomplete without a discussion and a plan for wildfires. Just like other important issues, we should develop goals, policies, objectives, measures on wildfire and report our progress. We do a pretty good job of responding to immediate crises. It's not easy, but we have that motivation. But planning and funding and implementing long-term solutions to our chronic problems present much greater challenges. Everybody knows that effective long-term planning can help reduce the negative impacts of wildfire. Local governments are the first line of defense. Boulder County spent more than $2.4 million helping to recover from the 4 Mile fire. Unfortunately, in the past, we've been penny wise and pound foolish. So this amendment is a common sense, first step approach to treating this as a long-term issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Next on the list, we have Gene Putnam from the City of Thornton.
Good evening. My name is Gene Putman. I'm the Transportation Manager for the City of Thornton. What I'm talking about tonight is the RTD's amendment. This is a black day for this entire region when we have to take what we voted for in 2004 to have a transit system that went into all of the corridors, and we're going to be finished by 2016. Now we find ourselves that 2 of those corridors, the North Metro and the Northwest, are now being extended out beyond even Dr. Cogg's regional horizon. It will be extended even further than the horizon you're currently working on, 2040, because RTD has said they don't see where it's going to happen until 2044. This is a black day for the Denver area because we can't even come into what other states and cities have done and have mass transit. And if you look at the diagram that was shown there, what's not being done is all on the north side. I am constantly bombarded by citizens complaining about sufficient bus service, and now they are angry that they're not even going to get rail service, which occurs on the southwest, southeast, is going to open in April 26th to the west side, is going to go out to DIA, going to finish on I-225, is going to go out to the Golden Line. Where I had hoped to see that this was going to happen in our area, it's now going to not happen until 2044. This region needs to come together, work with RTD, and find a way to finish fast tracks, not delay it for 40 years after it was approved by the voters. This is a black day for this state and this region.
Thank you, Gene. Next, we have George Gerstle, Boulder County.
Thank you. I'm George Gerstle, Transportation Director for Boulder County. I'd like to provide comment on 2 elements. One is what Gene just talked about. Certainly the sentiment that he expressed is shared by many up in the north and northwest corridor. We would like to, however, acknowledge and thank you for your approval of $15 million towards the US 36 Managed Lane project, which we're working very closely with CDOT and the HPT and to get underway and complete in the next few years, and also to acknowledge RTD's commitment towards that project. Then the second point I'd like to make in relation to that is that we hope that DRCOG remains committed to helping us fund what comes out of the Northwest Area Mobility Study that is being funded by RTD with the cooperation of CDOT and all the communities to find the way forward for the improved mobility for the north part of this region. So it's unfortunate that we're in this situation, but we hope that you will continue to work with us to find the solution and address the frustration that Gene has talked about. The second point I'd like to talk to is the HOV policy definition on the US 36 corridor. When we started this process probably 12 years ago, the point of consensus that brought the community and the corridor together was that any tolls that are imposed on this corridor would be imposed for the purposes of managing mobility, not increasing revenue. So what is an important point, and the reason that Boulder County has been able to support moving forward with the proposed change in policy, is that a significant portion of that incremental revenue be dedicated to transit demand management, and related alternative modes improvements, and that that funding be allocated collaboratively with the communities in the corridor. So we have started a negotiation and IGA with HPT and CDOT, and we're very hopeful that will come to a satisfactory conclusion in the very near future. So with that, Boulder County can support the proposed change in HOV from 2 to 3. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Are there any others that would like to make commentary in this public hearing before we close it? Jim?
I have a question. I believe it's my understanding now that motorcycles can ride in the HOV lanes. If you move from HOV 2 to HOV 3 passengers, I'm assuming that the motorcycles would continue to be able to ride there. But I think it's unfair if you move it to HOV for 3 passengers, for those of us who drive a 2-seater car, that we're not allowed to be on there because we can't put 3 passengers in our car. So I'd like to take that into consideration.
Jim, I understand that, Jim, as a motorcycle rider. I guess I'd have to have a passenger to do that. Be fair. Yes, Jim Benson.
Well, Jim, you know all that you have to do is to get an E470 transponder, and you can ride in the lanes. If you have one person or one...
Well, since I...
Oh, boy. No other comments? Any other final questions from the board? Public hearing? Okay, this brings tonight's initial public hearing on 2012 Cycle 2 amendments and air quality conformity to a close. As I mentioned before, I'm extending the public comment period on HOV toll-free policy amendment until February 20th, 2013. At that time, the public hearing will be reconvened. Thanks for the testimony and your interest. Now, moving on to the next item, we have a short report. We know we had no meeting in December, and probably depending on what area of the MPO region you lived in, you either thought that I'm glad I don't have to drive on that ice and the blizzard, or you thought I'm walking to the store and I don't know why we're not having a meeting. So, but that's weather in Colorado, so that's just the way things roll out for us. One of the things is the RTC meeting, they did convene, they acted on what was on the table, but we did not report to you because that was on that agenda. RTC did recommend actions proposed by DRCOG's staff regarding the delays of the TRIP projects. That's on tonight's consent agenda. It's attachment F. RTC recommended that the Doctor Board recommend to the Governor that RTD be identified as the designated recipient of FTA Section 5310 funds. That's also on the consent agenda tonight, and that was attachment G in your packet. RTC also recommended the 4th quarter TIP policy amendments and that's item 14 on tonight's action agenda. Dr. Cog's staff briefed RTC on the Cycle 2 amendments, which we heard about earlier tonight in that public hearing, and on the MetroVision scenario analysis following the MVIC discussion of this topic earlier in December. And that's what had happened at the RTC. And with that, we have a few other things to do. Call Jim. It seems self-serving for me to have to call you for this, but with term limits, we'll see that one of the awards in particular tonight is probably one that will be retired unless something else changes. So.
Well, as an immediate past chair of Dr. Cog, it's my privilege to give you a clock honoring your 5 years on Board of Directors for Dr. Cog. Dennis, congratulations.
Thank you. Well, if you know the history of this, I was surprised that Rod didn't send an emissary down to hold this hostage based on a threat I had made about his. So, but he must have been out of that sense of humor for the night. Next one, I would like to present an award to Cliff Mueller, who's the city of Sheridan. If you'd step up here for a minute. Cliff has served for the past 10 years, and as you know at our regular board meetings, has been very, very active, especially for those of us who have a little tinge of other color in their hair, no matter what other original color it was earlier in life. It happens. It's better than none. It's better. Let me give that hand to you.
It's been fun.
It's been fun, he said.
That's 10 years of your life.
So if at 10 years, that's what happens. You keep doing it for 10 years.
It gets better as you go along.
Now, this next award is the one I was speaking about earlier, and this is a 15-year award. And the reason why I made that comment is if you think about the effect of term limits on what we do here and what political action happens in the state of Colorado, the institutional knowledge that gets lost in the shuffle is a huge issue. And I dare say there's very few people that have approached the political life with the depth and the energy and desire that Will has put in. So Will Tour, you step up to receive this well-deserved award.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not going to leave my last meeting without taking a couple minutes to just talk first about what a great experience this has been for me. When I first got elected to the Boulder City Council in November of '97, I knew I wanted to work on regional issues and immediately volunteered to be our representative to the Dr. Cog board. And over that 15 years, it's just really been a tremendous experience. And I know at times it can be pretty frustrating. You know, you've got 50 people in a room trying to make a decision, and it's hard enough with 9 council members, a little easier with 3 county commissioners. 50 people in a room, that's a challenge, representing a really diverse set of community interests. And I know that there's always a tension between to what extent are we each here representing sort of the parochial interests of our community, and to what extent are we representing and trying to advance a regional vision, and we're all, depending on the issue, sort of more or less one end or the other of that scale. I do know that I've played both of those roles, and the ones that I've been proudest of have been when I've really been able to be part of a focus on what's really in the best interests of the region, not just the best interests of my community. And I'm just really proud of the work that we've all done together over the years. And I think that over time, the board has moved more and more towards a real focus on what are the policies that we want to advance as a region, and how do we translate those policies from sort of grand vision into sort of real tangible on-the-ground difference. And I think about the difference that I think the urban growth boundary has made over the years, the the difference that we have made through really making a concerted effort to make sure that we're investing in all modes of transportation. And when I think of the sustainability principles that the board, I believe, unanimously adopted a couple of years ago, that you're going to really have the opportunity to really make real as you work on the 2040 plan adoption. I think it's going to be a really exciting time over the next few years. I'm sorry I won't be here at the table to share that with you, but you will certainly be seeing me probably at that end of the room. So,
Well, it's a tough situation. You think about the loss of Will as far as being a board member, but like, as he said, the best thing about the situation he's now in is at this point the public hearing is over, and that means Will would be able to just go ahead and get on the bus and go home, not stay here till 10 or whatever her time it happens to be. So that's the way that's going to be. Two of the things I might add is that he had a reception in Boulder, then it was quite impressive, the range of folks that showed up to honor him in that regard. And I think that's one of the messages that gets overlooked is the wide swath of different people that respected two things about Will, in my estimation, is that he walks the talk, he does what he lives the life that he's visioned for what the region should be. That's what he's committed to doing. It's not just a 2-hour show for him. And I'm not saying that anybody else, that's all they do, but he really kind of defines that. And the other one is that you can be on the opposite ends of the spectrum from him on any issue. And what he calls you out on isn't that he disagrees with you. He calls out, so what's your vision? If you don't like my vision, what's yours? And come back with that with some kind of an answer. And so I think that's remarkable. So at this point in the meeting, I'm glad that we were all enthusiastically supporting his time, and I know that we have not seen the last of Mr. Tour. He will be here to add comments. With that, Executive Director's report. You get to follow him.
Just a few things, excuse me, I want to bring you up to date on and make a few announcements. One of the things that the Area Agency on Aging and our lobbyists and I have been working on is the sequester. I know you've all heard about sequestration. I've talked about it here. We're 44 days away from the new deadline that was adopted by Congress. We've been doing a number of things related to this. We've made a number of trips to Washington to talk to members of the Colorado delegation. Each time we refine our message and our information just a little bit better. I have been basically doing what I did about 3 years ago on transportation rescissions and trying to build a national coalition, mostly through LinkedIn. I found out that there are a lot of AAAs that have staff that are on LinkedIn, but more importantly, there are a lot of service providers of AAA services on LinkedIn. So I have a lot of new contacts there, and I've been sending out information and particularly links to the DRCOG website, which has data and information, as well as, again, just like we did with rescissions, documents that you can take and personalize for your own organization, no matter what state you're in. As it stands right now, like I said, the sequestration would take effect in 44 days, and it would basically, it's anticipated that it would gut the programs that the DRCOG AAA offers. So the other thing that we've kind of figured out just based on reviewing our information and who uses our service, we would anticipate about 25% of our clients to be forced into some sort of facility where the services to go away, things that keep people independent and in their homes, things like transportation to and from, shopping or doctor's appointments, a meal delivery, etc. The real irony of sequestration is that it's intended to reduce taxpayer burden, but these are really low-cost programs, and in fact, at Dr. Cog anyway, our average user, we invest somewhere between $150 and $300 a month. But when you force people into facilities and they spend down their resources, then they're beginning to access Medicare and Medicaid at a tune of something more like $3,500 to $4,000 a month. So it's a much better taxpayer value to keep the AAA services, keep people independent and in their homes for as long as possible. So we're continuing to work on that. I just want to call your attention, there's not going to be a presentation tonight, but I wanted to call your attention to attachment Q in the packet, which is an update on MetroVision 2040 and the planning exercise. The board approved a meeting or two ago a MetroVision Planning Advisory Committee, and the guidance and policy rules of play for that committee, and the chair has now made his appointment. So for a full list of those folks, you can find that in attachment Q. I wanted to let you two know that we've been working on a bill over the Capitol. You're not going to hear about it from Rich because you've asked not to hear about bills that haven't been introduced yet, but because Dr. Cog's staff is working on this bill, we thought we should let you know about it. You'll recall that your adopted policy guidance for state legislation includes trying to find more funding for seniors in the AAA program. We have the bill that we're working on would actually increase the state appropriation to the Older Coloradans Fund, which funds the AAA. And you've supported efforts like this in the past. This isn't anything new. Basically what we've done is created a joint effort between Dr. Cog and AARP and capitalized on an agreement that we got from the governor's office a few months ago. He was amenable to putting an additional $2 million one-time allocation into his budget for the AAA, and what we have been working on is to make that a recurring addition to the AAA funds. We're actually now working with Senator Guzman from the Denver area. She's agreed to carry the bill, and this could come up in committee before the next board meeting. So again, I just wanted to make you apprised that this was something that that we've been working on. I want to also call your attention to the Brookings report that should be at your seat. It's titled the Utah Model, but it's largely about the Wasatch Front. And actually, Rick Garcia, who is the regional administrator for HUD, asked that I share this with the board. Rick is also a former board member and actually former chair of Dr. Cog. But there's some really interesting information in here, and it really provides some good insight on how a region very similar to ours has managed to get through and cope with and approach regional planning, particularly on those sorts of contentious and controversial growth and development issues. So if you have the opportunity, give this a read. It's I know that there are a lot of pages here, but it's actually pretty interesting and pretty well written. I wanted to call your attention too to this flyer at your seat. Particularly, I wanted to mention the Transportation Shorts course. You'll remember a month or two ago I gave kind of a primer on the transportation planning process. We have huge turnover on this board. I think Denny mentioned, I don't know, close to 6 or 8 names tonight of new folks at the table. This board has a turnover of 25% every 2 years. So we have people like Will who just left after 15 years of service on the board, and then we have people that are brand new. Some people are brand new to elected office and certainly therefore brand new to DRCOG. So we have this huge diversity in knowledge and understanding of the programs and processes here at DRCOG. So one of the things that the officers and the planning committee that put together the workshop agenda for this year, we want to talk about transportation a little bit more. So that presentation that I did, that primer on transportation, was phase 1. The short course is phase 2. I know that some of you have attended in the past, and certainly encourage anyone who is new to attend the transportation short course. It's from 4 to 6:30 here at DRCOG on the 31st. That'll be the second phase, and then the third phase of this process will be the workshop and talking about policy and direction of transportation planning. How do we deal with the changes that are going on, not only with MAP 21, but the fiscal environment that we're operating in, the challenges that the board has faced over the last couple of years with unanticipated revenues and not really having policies that are really flexible and easily deal or allow you to deal in an environment like that, and also talking about are there things related to transportation policy that here at DRCOG that you'd like to change to be more nimble, more flexible, to work easier and more effectively in a very volatile, or what has been volatile, maybe it won't be in the future because there won't be any money, but what has been a very volatile environment for transportation funding investment. So if you haven't attended, I can't stress strongly enough the importance of attending, not only for the workshop, but for a better understanding of what the federal process is, all the hoops that you as an MPO have to go through in order to expend these funds, etc. So enough said on that. Yet another flyer. Board workshop, it is coming up on February 21st. There's a couple of pages related to that. The other's just a plain black and white. If you haven't made your reservations, please do. I talked with Connie earlier, and she tells me that we have more people registered this year at this particular stage of the game than we had registered for last year's workshop, and there's some agenda material that I think Pat is going to go through later on in the agenda. So both she and the officers may have some additional things that they want to tell you about the workshop. But again, please put it on your calendar. Please plan to attend. Connie has negotiated a really good rate for us at Cheyenne Mountain. The meals are included. The only thing that we're asking board members to pay for is their room. And then, you know, I told you the wrong date, I think. I'm sorry, I've gotten ahead of myself. It's the 22nd, not the 21st. But that's okay because there's something going on the 21st as well. On the 21st is the next DRCOG orientation. This is an opportunity to kind of get the basics. It's a DRCOG 101. It's particularly good for new board members and new alternates as well as new staff. It's a required course of DRCOG staff. Any new employee at DRCOG has to attend orientation as well, because we tend to find that people are hired in a certain area, and once they're hired they don't necessarily interact with or even understand some of the other areas of the organization. So again, this is it's a really good opportunity not only to get the very basic information about DRCOG, but also meet some of the other new kids here at the board table. And then the last thing I wanted to announce was Live, Work, Play. This event happens every other year here at DRCOG. It's on the off year we do your regular DRCOG regional award event. This is going to be held on April 24th. So put that on your calendars as well. This is the DRCOG Board's opportunity to shine a spotlight on those great places and projects and events that make the region such an excellent place for people of all ages, incomes, and abilities. Once again, we're going to have a People's Choice Award. As the name implies, it's actually the public that makes the award selection. The 2011 winner was the Villaggio project in Arapahoe County. It had a lot of really good competition. And what we need now is some help with some nominations. There's some criteria out on the DRCOG website. You can self-nominate your community or project, but would also like to encourage you to have others in your community nominate their projects as well. Again, this flyer has a lot of good information on it. And the one, I guess, really big change up this year, or addition to this, to the Live, Work, Play program this year, is that we're going to also recognize employers and commuters as it relates to our newly established Way to Go program. Have you guys seen some of the Way to Go billboards? I know there's 3 or 4 of them up on Broadway alone. So what we want to do is, in conjunction with kicking off Way to Go and trying to get more people using alternative modes of transportation, teleworking, etc., we want to recognize those employers and individuals who are really embracing commuting alternatives. We're going to have 9 News highlight all of the finalists for this event. So please plan to attend, mark your calendars, and if you've got any questions or concerns, you can give us a call here at DRCOG. And with that, I'll stop. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. 2 more things. Sorry. Yeah. I had mentioned this in the administrative committee earlier this evening, but I wanted to let everyone know that Steve Rudy, who has been our transportation director for quite some time now, has informed me of his intent to retire as of March 31st. Steve's been a great resource for me as well as the board. He's kind of like an elephant in that he never forgets anything. He's been a great resource. If we wanted to know, what did the board do 20 years ago on this, Steve Rudy is the go-to guy. He knows, he remembers. So we're going to miss him. So it'll be around a couple more months, but just want to let everyone know that was occurring. And finally, Pat had reminded me too that I don't know if most of you get this magazine or not. I know that many of you do. It's put out by the Realtors, and it's called On Common Ground. You guys, does that sound familiar? Yep. DRCOG is mentioned in this edition. It talks about how we partnered with the Realtors recently. Well, it's not that recent now, I guess. It's been a year and a half ago maybe. But we did this great tour of the West Corridor, and there were a number of you that are still here that were on that tour. And what's really exciting about it, I think, was we took this tour, and the site that we actually went to see is the catalytic project for the on the West Corridor as it relates to the Sustainable Communities Initiative, that HUD grant, that $4.5 billion that that the board received. So it was really neat to go to that site and hear about what was going to happen. And now through all of the stakeholders on the corridor, and in large part the city of Lakewood and Denver, that's really beginning to happen now. So congratulations for that mention in that publication.
Thank you, Jennifer. I know one of the things that was mentioned earlier, Will was talking about how immediately after he was elected, he jumped right into what was the regional idea that he wanted to deal with. And it reminded me that tonight in the room is a person that got my interest in transportation, peaked right after my election in 2005. Happens to still be involved regionally. I guess it never goes away. You just change where you work, and you're interested in the region. I recognize Karen Stewart as our past mayor, who was very active in Dr. Cog when we met over in Cherry Creek, not downtown here. And Paula probably knows that because she probably lived next door. But anyway, that's the way these things work. You know, you look at it and you have to get involved if you want change to happen. So the predictability in our environment has changed dramatically since 2005. The political atmosphere has changed, the financial has changed, and also the way the money is doled out has changed. So if you looked at the meeting in 2005 and you look at what we're dealing with today, there's a reason why there's a discomfort and a disconnect, because we're not dealing with the same systems in place and the reality on the ground. And those things, I think, are kind of tied together in those two messages. Okay, next we have a presentation of responsible acceleration of maintenance and partnership ramp, map 21, and we have Don Hunt will speak to us about it. Welcome, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Executive Director and board members. I was here about a year ago. At that time, I was kind of floating the idea of CDOT and RTD joining together and maybe doing a little bit larger sales tax. That didn't work out so well.
Thanks for trying.
But you got to keep the conversation going. You really do. So I'm here tonight to talk about something hopefully that's a little more pleasant. Maybe it'll make you nervous too, but that's all right. It's a ramp, and I'll also be talking just a little bit about our operations division, newly formed, and I'll be talking a little bit about the consolidation of 6 to 5 engineering regions for CDOT. So first of all, ramp. What is ramp? Responsible acceleration of maintenance and partnerships. One of the things that became clear to me, I've now been at CDOT almost 2 years. Valentine's Day next month will be my 2-year anniversary, and it takes you a little while to hear some of these things. And after I'd been there maybe 6 or 9 months, someone pointed out to me that other states were starting to be a little bit more progressive with the way they managed their funding. And CDOT tended to save up for each project, maybe over 2 or 3 or 4 years, and then spend it over 2 or 3 or 4 years. Well, if you think about doing that for hundreds of projects, you end up with an awful lot of money in the bank, which isn't wrong. It's very conservative, and you'll never run out of money. But in these times of tighter funding availability, again, I come from the private side of the world, and cash management is just something you do. And we all sat down at CDOT, and over a period of, it really took 12 months. We even had to take a trip to the North Carolina DOT because they've been at it for 8 years. They run the same accounting system we do. And the good news in all of that is we believe over the next 5 years, with appropriate expenditure matching to projects, project needs, we can release on a one-time basis $300 million a year for 5 years. So that's awfully good news in times of constrained funding. So how are we going to manage that? First off, this is over and above our normal program. What's been stipped or tipped in the next few years is still going to continue on, and we'll continue to do that on a rolling basis as we always have. But because we're going to deploy more revenue, we don't have more funding coming in, we're just going to spend some of the money we already have more rapidly, we can manage to deploy, again, we think, $300 million a year for the next 5 years. We thought because of our situation, we better develop some specific ways that that money is going to be spent. I had some conversations with the governor about what he thought, and so what we've done is broken it into 2 programs. One side is what we're going to call really maintenance, asset management. That's mostly CDOT. And then the other side is going to be partnerships. So I'll just talk a minute about asset management. We have, as you know, the need to preserve our 9,000-mile highway system, bridges, tunnels, and we're woefully short of keeping up. Our highway system, the surface condition, has gone down from say about 42% poor roadways in Colorado to 52% just in the last 5 or 6 years. We're not keeping up. In bridges, we are keeping up because in 2009 the legislature passed the FASTER bill, and there's $100 million a year that's dedicated for bridge rehabilitation. We don't have a tunnel program. We need to start reinvesting in some of our larger tunnels. The Eisenhower Tunnel is 40 years old. The Hanging Lakes Tunnel is 25 years old. So half of the program, more or less, is going to go into reinvesting in Colorado's assets, infrastructure assets, highway assets, and at least for a 5-year period, will keep things from getting worse. It should stabilize where we are. Probably what's more relevant for all of you is the partnership side. Really two very important principles here. Public-private partnerships. Mike Shirotis didn't want to stay around and listen to this wonderful speech I was going to make. He wanted to make sure that we were on board with HOV3 in 2017. But, you know, the enterprise was created, again, in 2009 with that FASTER legislation, but there was really no capitalization of that enterprise. Really, they've been borrowing money from CDOT for operating expenses. The idea is that as more private deals are done over time, the enterprise can take success fees off of that and be involved in developing projects. It's going to take a while to do that. So what RAMP does, if you take the other half of the $300 million per year for partnerships, we're going to, for the first time, say to the private sector, we have some corridors here that we think have the potential for private investment, taking the toll risk, just like US 36, like we're doing with the last portion of US 36 to complete it all the way to Table Mesa. And we always know that in all of those projects, even though the private sector may step up, take the toll risk, there's still project development costs that will incur, and there's probably still a public subsidy that's needed. These projects don't pay for themselves entirely out of toll revenue. So for the first time, HPTE is going to have some pump priming money. That's the P3 part of the program. And then there's also a public-public part. We believe that we want to extend CDOT's money, and we're asking for local government to step up, put projects together, and bring some local money to the table in order to match the CDOT money. We don't know what those projects are today. I have some ideas. We've certainly been approached by a number of communities across the state. Gee, how much money do you have? We have some. Do you have any? We've had to say, no, we don't have any. So for the first time now, we have a public-public partnership program, and we'll be able to deploy, hopefully, some money to match local funds to get some new projects done. I have to say, this is bad. The one bit of bad news is by local money, we mean really local money. We don't mean federal money that went to Dr. Cog, then to the local government. So that's the only fair way to do it when there are only 3 places, North Front Range, Dr. Cog, and Pikes Peak, that get money from the federal government. We need to be fair with everybody in the state. It's not to say we wouldn't appreciate some Dr. Cog money in these projects as well. So we'll see how that turns out. Deborah Perkins-Smith is really putting together the criteria right now. We'll be having our first discussion with the commission, really first public discussion tomorrow. So stay with us. Think of projects. I've become more popular in the last month since this got out, which is good. I enjoy that. I don't have to say no yet, but I know we're going to have demand that is greater than the supply. But $300 million a year that we didn't have just a few months ago is pretty big news, and I hope we can do some really good things here in the metro area with that money. So that's RAMP. I think I hit everything there. I'm going to talk now about our engineering region boundaries. We had a great CDOTer retire and go to the private sector, Reza Akavan, who I'm sure was here every meeting for years. Reza was great at putting together projects in the metro area and really partnering with the RTD and extending the CDOT money. But he's gone, and when we looked at how we were configured with our regions, we decided to really more or less merge regions 1 and 6. Is Tony here tonight? Tony DeVito, whom at least people know from the south side of the metro area, will be the new director of the merged 1 and 6. There's some other adjustments that try to balance out that workload, but we think that better aligns with the DRCOG boundary. We still have some of the, Boulder County isn't in the same region, and that'll continue to be Johnny Olson, who works out of Greeley. But at least we've got the southern portion of the DRCOG area in Jefferson County, Douglas County, better aligned, and we've done some better alignment with the transportation planning regions as well. I want to reiterate, I always say this, these are the engineering regions. These are not the funding regions. We will continue to work with MPOs and transportation planning regions to identify how we get funds and identify projects that need to be done and make sure that we have an equitable distribution across the state. It's the engineering regions, though, that do implement the projects, and they're the ones here to help you develop your projects. So Tony is a very important person to get to know if you don't know him. He will help you access the RAMP program. Then the last thing that I wanted to, major thing that I wanted to talk about is our new operations division. This is really important in the Denver region and also I think going to be important to the I-70 mountain corridor. We have a lot of folks at CDOT who do big, long projects and think in the terms of months and years. But we don't have enough money now to always be building new projects, new lanes, in order to maintain mobility on the state highway system. So I've talked with other states, and I think what most other states are going to be moving to is an operations division, 24/7, real-time. People who can be looking at our highway system like our intelligent transportation system folks, but we're also going to be having other challenges by way of tolling, maybe even real-time tolling. We're talking about peak period shoulder lanes where we might open up a shoulder during peak periods, shut it back down again after the commute. There are other kind of advanced traffic management capabilities that are coming to DOTs, variable speed limits in order to control the speed of cars when they're approaching congestions or an accident. And who knows what's going to happen in terms of the technology that's going to come out of the auto industry by way of vehicle-to-vehicle communication as well as vehicle-to-infrastructure communication so that we know right on our dashboards in real time where should we be, how should we be planning our trip, when should we be leaving, how should we be modifying our route. So that technology is already available. We're only going to see more of it, and we want to be ready at CDOT to really take advantage of it and manage traffic in real time, increase mobility at low cost. So I've hired a new person, Ryan Rice. He's going to have to work with all the DRCOG staff. Rudy, how do you get to retire? You know, I started working with him about 30 years ago, and I'm still working, and he's going to be retired? That isn't fair. Yeah, I think he's too young. I wouldn't let him go, Jennifer, if I were you. Just deny it. But this operations division will work especially closely with DRCOG staff to really manage traffic, and I hope do more travel demand management as well in the Denver region. So that's a lot. I'm going to say one more thing. Accountability. You know, the governor is really tough on all of us in the cabinet about accountability and transparency. We're really trying to step it up at CDOT. We have just added to our website a new function called Your CDOT Dollar. In fact, if you just search Google, you can find Your CDOT Dollar right away. You can put in how many miles you drive and find out how much revenue you're generating for the state of Colorado and where it's being spent. And you can see how we're doing on every project. We had all those bridge enterprise projects up on the website. Schedule, budget. Now we have every CDOT project up on the website. You can see how we're doing, as well as the metrics, our major performance criteria for the department, all on Your CDOT Dollar. I could talk all night. I really am enjoying this. I want to thank you. We can't do anything right now without local partners, and I think we have a really good relationship. I hope it's with all of you, but I know it's with most of you. You're really engaged and really helping to think about the region's transportation future. So I'm going to stop talking and see if there are any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we appreciate that, Don. In particular, your attempt to lend some efficiency, transparency, and some forward thinking in a world that's been pretty challenged. I'm sure there are board members that may have a comment or two. Rod?
Mr. Hunt, 4 quick things. 1,
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you for your leadership. 2, thank you for your vision. Perhaps even more so, number 3, thank you for your accessibility. And 4, and lastly, I'd like you to make a commitment to stay to continue to provide stability to CDOT, which we haven't had in the past.
Thank you. Thank you for those 3 comments.
That's all. Well, there's still more, though, I'm afraid.
I missed one?
Jim?
All right, thanks.
Jim?
Thanks, Mayor.
Don, thank you for coming with an update for us tonight. But can you tell me how you would anticipate the ramp funding would dovetail with our physically constrained transportation plans here at Dr. Cog?
Okay. I didn't include this. We believe that at Dr. Cog, you have the ability, if you take the same approach as CDOT, to release on the order of about $200 million on a one-time basis by going to expenditure management rather than long-term budget management of the projects. So it's still fiscally constrained. You're still doing a budget. You're still putting budget in a given year. But when the projects aren't all being done right away, you can manage the money across all projects in a given year. And just with Dr. Cog alone, if you want to participate, and it's going to take some additional work, we think Dr. Cog could release an additional $200 million one-time basis.
You know, I think that comment you reiterate probably asks us to all educate the public also that one time is an important qualifier, because they're comfortable thinking that it's a continuing process, and it is not. So,
as the chairman says, this does not solve our problem. You know, we're still at the state level over the next 5 years probably $500 million short in terms of the needs that were outlined by the TBD Colorado, the private effort initiated by the governor. But you know, $300 million is $300 million a year, one-time basis $200 million. It's not easy because it's hard enough for CDOT to manage its projects and have predictability about schedule. When is the money going to be spent? What not just what year, but what month, and what money. We have, you know, 3, 4, 5 different major colors of money, kinds of money. So managing all of that in real time is a challenge. And to deploy it here at Dr. Cog, because now we just don't have one implementer. We have many local implementers of projects. It's another level of challenge. So I want to say there's hope, but we would have to really double our resolve to do it at this level.
yeah. Challenge to educate for everybody over 5 years. Jack, did you have a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Hunt, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. By the way, I would like to summarize Mayor Rakowski's 4 thank yous into a simple one, which is thank you for your money.
It's nicely stated. Bob Roth?
Yeah, specific question. I wanted to know if a future city street connecting a highway to a major employment center, would that be eligible for ramp?
Oh, there come the tricky questions. I think we may have a criterion in ramp, and Deb, help me, that if it is, did you come up with the word yet, associated or integrated or integrated with the state highway system, you've got some potential.
Okay, Robin, did you have a comment also?
Been waiting for a year to say what Ron Rakowski just said. Just ditto that. But question for, I'm trying to add up the 50%. So 50% for the asset management, maintenance stuff. 50% for partnerships. How much for private versus public or completely project by project?
We'll be setting some goals with the Transportation Commission on how to take that 50% for partnerships and split it.
Right.
I suspect it's going to be a little bit, maybe a target early on and then managed over time, because maybe we'll get poor response on the public-private side and we'll be able to do more public-public, or vice versa.
Okay.
It's kind of refreshing to hear an open answer like that, because it is a new environment. Other comments? Jennifer?
I'll just apologize in advance, Don. There always has to be a skunk in the room, so tonight it'll be me. Can you talk a little bit about how what you're proposing to do at CDOT fits with the MOUs that CDOT has with Dr. Cog in particular?
Every party needs a poop.
I know, I know.
Oh, you know, the commission and I am not wild about these MOUs. You know, not so much here with Dr. Cog. I think that the way we've gone about it and the open conversation we've had, it's worked pretty well, and certainly the Denver metro area was the origin of the idea of an MOU in terms of fair share of the state's funding. I've spent an extraordinary amount of time in the Pikes Peak region over the last year going over an MOU that no one can really understand all of the words, and we ended up in a totally different way of computing their share of the state's money than we do here in Denver. So now we've got two completely different MOUs with different rules. My own preference, and I'll just be honest, I wonder in the current funding environment, while we're waiting for the federal government to decide what role they're going to play in in funding at all in this country, how much time we should spend on an MOU. I just think we're doing the my recommendation is we're doing the 2040 plan. I think we're going to be changing how we do resource allocation. We're going to be doing much more asset management, much more investment on lowest life cycle cost, and much like the bridge enterprise, you know, Denver area gets what it gets because there are deficient bridges, not because it's the Denver area. It's where the need was. So my own feeling is until we have a really new funding source, I wonder if it's worth spending a lot of time on an MOU, just asking the question.
And I think that this will be something that the board will talk about at its workshop in February. And for those of you who may not have been here 9 years ago when the MOU was discussed, under the leadership of Tom Norton in Don's position, the Dr. Cog board was seeing an ongoing reduction in the amount of funding that was coming to the region. And I won't get into all of the machinations of this, but basically what happened was that the board reminded CDOT and the commissioners and even members of the legislature that the Denver metro region provides a significant amount of the state's economy, somewhere close to 2/3. It has more than half the state's population, and indeed the gas tax that's collected in the Denver metro region helps subsidize transportation improvements in other places in the state. So this agreement was negotiated between CDOT and the Dr. Cog board to assure that the board got something closer to what they felt like was their fair share. And then there was also an incentive that was added into this that would cause the board to support CDOT and the legislature in raising additional funds for transportation. And I think that Steve Rudy and I and others would agree that it was very poorly written, but over the years we've tried very hard to be sure that we were true to it, that everyone kind of stuck to it. So again, I think that the board will probably want to talk about this a little bit more, but I certainly hear what you're saying as well, and I apologize for being the skunk tonight.
And Jennifer, I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just trying to be honest with all of you and where should we be spending our time.
That's good information.
And I would point out, I have to be a little careful how I say this, but the RAMP program is very much aligned to the urbanized portions of the state of Colorado. When you're talking about P3s and tolling, there aren't a lot of places in the state that can do that. And when you're talking about governments that might have enough money to ante up a local share, that certainly isn't eastern plains of Colorado. So we hope that there's something in this program for everyone. Certainly asset management, that half of it is all about preserving the entire 9,000-mile system.
Yes, Robin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quick, is there a mode limitation on this for the P3 stuff, or can it be multimodal?
So that is a really good question, too. It is primarily for roadway projects or roadway projects that would enhance transit. When you start talking about specific transit investment, like building tracks or buying transit vehicles, we have not used the state gas tax to do that because of constitutional limitations. Some of the federal money, although I'll open the door a little bit, some of the federal money we have can be flexed. The general federal project money we receive can be flexed to transit. So that's something, again, the Transportation Commission is going to have to decide how much flexing they want to do to transit.
Might also be whatever the MAP 21 interpretation turns out to be, because right now none of us have an idea.
We sure don't. Could I say something positive about transit, though? Sure. We only have positive in the sense that we have $15 million out of FASTER. That's our transit money for all of CDOT's $1.2 billion budget. So clearly, as I said, when you get to US 36 and we're investing in managed lanes that will also be enhanced transit, that's good. But when you talk about buying transit vehicles, or, you know, that's $15 million. The one thing we do believe, though, is that we can, by 2014, Mark Imhoff is our Transit and Rail Director. We're pretty serious. We think we can establish a backbone interregional bus system for the first time in Colorado, connecting Grand Junction to Denver, Fort Collins to Denver, and on to Pueblo, and at least have backbone bus service that would connect all the great regional transit systems in this state. Now, it won't be, you know, more than a few buses a day, maybe to start, but I think it will make a big difference in how we all view, you know, transit and the role of CDOT. So I'm really hopeful that in the next 18 months we get there and can announce that service.
I appreciate you entertaining that as a vision. You know, okay. It looks like you're off the hook for the moment, Don. I'm sure they'll have other comments.
Yeah, I'm going to get out while I can, I think.
This might be the best opportunity.
Again, thank you for what you do. I have really come to respect public service because I found out how hard it is. So thank you again for everything you do. Thank you. Good evening.
Thanks, Don. Okay, next on the agenda we have a public comment period. We have a total of 45 minutes allocated for this time. For each speaker will be 3 minutes. If any additional requests from the public to address the board, time will be allocated at the end of the meeting. I see that we already have our first speaker approaching the microphone, someone we all know. Go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Randall Loeb. I work for the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative as a board member and executive committee person. Metro Denver Homeless Initiative mirrors in many ways Dr. Cog, as I've stated many times, and we now have an executive director who came out of the governor's office who worked on the plan for implementation of homelessness, Gary Sanford. We are hoping to work much more closely with you. I also know one board member is a member of this group. And we have a point in time which we're doing on the 29th of January, which happens to be my 62nd birthday. And we would hope that on that day that you all are out there scurrying around, helping us to get self-reported numbers of those people who are homeless. As you may know, in the metro region, in the suburbs, more than half of the people who are homeless are families and individuals who are head of household usually, and usually about a third of those people are children under the age of 18 years of age. That's a sobering statistic because our numbers are somewhere around 13,000 people in the 7-county community. Our point in time also mirrors the HUD requirements that this be done on an annual basis and will become quarterly during the Homeless Management Information System rollout, which is also part of our organization. We read in the night that you canceled your meeting 150 names in the metro region of people who died at the city and county of Denver. And I would urge you to think about the housing plan that was adopted and it's the second one that I've read thoroughly, where 30 members of that commission were realtors, developers, and bankers, and they decided that it would be important to develop housing for the 30 to 50% area mean income, and I would hold that the area mean income means nothing when the quality of life, and I call it quality of housing, housing for life, is not really addressed. We do not have sufficient housing for those families. We do not have sufficient places for individuals to go. So I was hoping that he would still be here, and I'm giving this message to you, that I would hold that on nights like the nights that we had during the time of the vigil to the end of the year, and in times like this, that there be free bus passes like they do for New Year's Eve for people who live marginally and are at risk of freezing to death or losing digits, that they could get on a bus or any mode of transportation and go anywhere they please so that their lives would be saved. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you for your comments. Do you have anyone else to approach the mic tonight on a public comment? Seeing none, okay, we'll end this public comment period. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. In your packet, it's item number 10. Involves the minutes of October 17th, the amendment for the DRCOG Advisory Committee, designate location for posting of notices for meetings for the year, approve actions proposed by DRCOG staff regarding implementation delays of the TIP projects, adopt a resolution recommending the governor identify the Regional Transportation District, RTD, as the designated recipient of Federal Transit Administration Section 5310 funds, and approving MetroVision Citizens Advisory Committee descriptions. Do I have a motion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Moving on to the action agenda. On the action agenda tonight, we have to adopt the 2013 policy statement for state legislative issues. And of Rich Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That takes us to agenda item I believe. Actually, the next 3 agenda items are mine, and 2 of those are carried over from the December board meeting that was canceled. So the first item then is the state policy statement that we're updating, and again, just quick reminder, every year around the end of the year, we update our state legislative policy statement and our federal legislative policy statement to serve as a guide for the board, the staff, and lobbyists on issues coming before us, legislative issues coming before us at state capitol and at the federal level. So and we send them out in advance. The board receives them a month in advance to give you chance, or your staff's chance, to read them and give us comments back, and then come back the following month for approval. As was noted in the agenda packet, with the memo that went with the state policy statement, we did receive 1 comment from Broomfield on, I think it's page 3 of the document. I'm not sure what it is online, but it's in the transit-oriented development paragraph. There's a term that's been in there referring to rail transit, and Broomfield suggested that that was a little bit too limiting. They had an interest in making sure that the terms we're using covered bus rapid transit, and so we worked with Danny and his staff to come up with an alternative term of high frequency transit, and they agreed to that. So with that addition, I'd ask for see if there's any questions or comments from the board, or otherwise ask for a motion to approve the state policy statement.
Okay. Any other comments or additions from the board? Yes, Nancy?
I'll move that we approve the policy statement.
Second.
We have multiple seconds. Let's see, who do you want to? There are 3. So, both Jen.
I
yes,
have a
Jackie.
question, and granted, I'm not completely clear on map 21, but I had an understanding that it talked about not tolling existing roadways, and we have in our policy statement to consider tolling existing roadways. So is there an inconsistency there or not?
You know, the thing that you're talking about existing roadways is, are they new roadways? Are they roadways at the end of their structural life? So are you talking about tolling new roadways, or are you talking about up to grade, everything's wonderful, and then all of a sudden you're going to toll the lane? I think that's part of the crux of the decision making that's going on. So, and I think that kind of speaks to what's the concerns, and also some of the background for map 21 that looked at what you're doing with roadways. The shortage in funding for roadways as such, that's the way they are addressing it right now. It's more about, we're only going to apply it to projects where that is true. You know, that's not a defined word, but I mean, that's where it seems to be at the moment.
So I just want to make sure our policy isn't inconsistent with the map 21 language, and you're saying it's not?
We should be okay with it because we're not applying it to,
And I
or
can have
nobody's brought
Steve
it up.
Rudy respond as well too, if it'll help clarify.
Just when you thought you were out there, Steve,
No,
you got pulled right in.
I just want to make you feel useful.
Within map 21, there are some provisions that allow for tolling of existing lanes. There's also discussion of congestion pricing, and congestion pricing is a concept that's identified within this, and you're going to have to do that on some existing lanes, and there's ways to do that within map 21. But I also think I'd like to point out that on the federal paper, we're encouraging the feds to consider even reducing the restrictions on this stuff even further. Okay. And so that's been on the federal side, that's been long-standing, and on this side it's been long-standing. So it's not inconsistent with map 21, but it's
as clear as mud at this point.
It's clear, yes, it's as clear as mud.
Okay.
I mean, I think Don and everybody who's tried to deal with this has said.
Right.
That's a good call out, and we'll keep that in mind. So, okay.
Okay. Without any other comments or questions, the motion and second's been made. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Same thing on the federal policy statement, which is attachment J. We did not receive any comments back on the federal policy statement. The main change to that paper was pretty extensive rewriting of the of the transportation section to reflect the changes in map 21 and redirected a little bit more toward implementing map 21 and anticipating issues coming up 2 years from now in the reauthorization. So with that, I'll see if there's any questions or comments.
Yeah. Based on the packet, anybody have any information that they'd like to share, comment on, or questions? If not, entertain a motion.
Move to adopt the 2013 policy statement of federal legislative issues as presented. Second.
And we have a second from Ursula. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, passes unanimously. Why stop now? You're doing well.
Thank you. That takes us to the state legislative issues. And as you know, the legislative session began January 9th. We're all so excited. I know I am. And since that was essentially the day that the board agenda packet was going out to the board, we really obviously didn't have time to review any bills and get them into the packet. So as per previous practice, reviewed bills in the rest of the week and over the weekend, and pulled the bills that we wanted to call to your attention out by just this past Monday, and I think ended up emailing it out to you and your staffs on Tuesday. Yes, Denny just showed you, we put handout on everybody's seat, and I'll just point out we had emailed out 2 bills. There were delays in introducing more bills after that first day, and then there were something like 100 bills introduced today, and we did find one that came out today that we wanted to call to your attention, and so I've added it on the third page. So I'd like to just go through real quick on these and then ask for, well, one of them asked for a motion on a staff recommendation, and the other two were asking really for direction from the board on how to proceed. So the first one I have is Senate Bill 27, which deals with parking at or near RTD transit stations, and is an effort to authorize parties other than RTD, developers, public entities, to develop or build parking lots, parking structures, and enter into a contract with RTD to make that a district facility that they would then be allowed to manage that parking and charge for it potentially and so forth. As I've understood in talking to some of the folks involved in that bill, there's a little bit of confusion in the way it's worded, and I tried to kind of characterize that in the staff comments. And so I think they're going to be working on some language changes to try to clarify exactly what it is they're trying to accomplish. So at this point, staff was suggesting that the board monitor that unless any of you here have more and better information how that proceeds. At this point, we'd just be asking to monitor the bill till next month, and hopefully we can get clarification on exactly how it's going to read.
You know, I think it's a good idea to monitor something like that for sure.
Can I provide one comment from the City of Boulder's perspective? The active management and pricing of parking is a key part of our transit village that we're developing in our core city area, and is really a key part of any transportation demand management strategy. And so this is and developers who are developing TODs, this is an important part of their strategies. One thing that the City of Boulder had a little concern with this bill, and I wanted to share with you, Rich, is that we had wanted to make sure that RTD worked with the local government to make sure on the pricing and the way it was set up that there was consultation with local authorities that currently is not in the bill.
Right, it's not. That's not clear in the bill.
And I'm sure that's something that other local jurisdictions represented here at DRCOG would want to see as well. So that RTD would be working with local authorities on the pricing or other aspects of that. If the bill does pass on the pricing of that parking. So just want to make sure that DRCOG supports some consultation or even stronger role for local jurisdictions when RTD does do that.
And if you can make a motion to that effect too, if you want.
If Casey, if you'd worded this in a motion to make sure local governments.
So that you give us direction.
I would like to make a motion that as part of the legislative agenda, I guess I'd say that there's support for some measure of local involvement in RTD in the provisions of Senate Bill 27. I'll just leave it that way.
I would second that if no one else will. Is there any discussion on that? I would add that we have a project that is being somewhat successful in that way, and RTD was very good with working with us, so there's some history to that, which is always a positive thing. Yes, Eva?
And Adams County had a couple of concerns also. Is one of is the charging of the fees on the parking. Is what our concern is when you start charging for parking is the fact you're going to be discouraging people from riding on the bus, which would put more cars on the road, which is totally what we're not trying to do when we want to encourage people to ride it. Another concern or actually another thing that we talked about is the fact that if we do decide to do the private-public parking, that the fees that are collected by RTD by that parking is dedicated to the lines that parking is located at.
Stays in that area?
Yes.
Revenue generated by the area stays in the area?
Right.
I think that our local approach to that was an ALID approach, and that's why it kind of met what you're thinking about. So that would be an essential part, I think, for most everybody at the table based on conversations we've had before. I'd be open to listening to what anybody else had to say about that. Is that a good direction for you?
That's fine. Yeah, I don't know if you need to, do you need to take a vote on the motion?
Okay.
No.
Do we have you want to take a vote on, do we have 2 amendments? Do you want to consider them separately or together? Do it separately. Okay, Casey's amendment, that local authorities are consulted in this process. All those in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, got unanimous support on that one. Eva's amendment, looking at revenues generated in such a facility, would be dedicated to the area that generated that. Yes?
I don't believe that was.
What's that?
I don't.
Oh, she didn't move that yet.
Comment, it wasn't a motion.
Yes.
You didn't want to go that far?
We need to have an official motion.
Yeah, I just, maybe later on we'll consider it.
Okay, we'll just do it as an advisory comment then.
Yeah.
Fine, on that
Okay.
one. Okay, so then that takes us to the second page and House Bill 1030.
Jim?
Rich, you never got a motion on what
On
you want
whole
to do,
bill.
whether you
Oh,
wanted
on
to.
the bill itself as
Yeah, we skipped
amended.
27 by doing the amendment.
All you did was amend it. You didn't do
We didn't do the
right.
whole bill.
That's right.
So I will move
Yeah,
that we
that's-
monitor Senate Bill 27.
We got multiple seconds. Those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. Move on to HB
Now
1030.
House Bill 1030. And this bill basically would add 2 additional members to the Transportation Commission. The 2 members would be charged to represent the whole state, not a district, but one would have to be appointed or a resident of the Western Slope, and one would have to be a resident of the Eastern Slope. And that's basically the bill. And again, staff came up with some comments raising some questions and issues about doing that, but ultimately decided to ask the board for your pleasure or direction on whether we take a position on that or not.
Okay, we'll entertain comments for Rich. Yes, Robin?
This is one I wish we would have had Don Hunt still in the room.
Still here?
I mean, I've heard of the Eastern Plains. I'm not quite sure what the Eastern Slope is and where Denver Metro falls, but I'm just surprised. If the intent is to have a statewide representative, then it's odd to me that you would designate geography for that representative, because then what you really have is a West Slope representative and whatever the East Slope is. And so, and I'm very concerned about the proportionality that this results in. And so, I mean, my instinct would be this is not a bill we should support, but I know that sometimes if you come out of the gate opposing a bill, you lose a seat at the table. So I was going to ask Rich if we have any suggestions for how we can stay at the table, whether it's prudent to keep a monitor position, expressing deep concerns to keep a seat at the table, or you know, I don't know. I get the idea of changing the size. I just don't get why you would call something at large and then restrict where it's from.
Right.
So I don't know what our, CDOT's thinking.
Well, and I would say in answer to your question, I think from my perspective, I'd have enough direction if you wanted to monitor it with expressing some concerns, and me and the lobbyists, we can go forward with that. Yeah.
Some of the comments that were made at STAC would be appropriate to think about at that point. Deborah, did you have a comment before?
Sure, I can respond for CDOT and Don's behalf. There are a couple of things that we're informing the governor of. No stance has been taken at this point, so we do not oppose. But exactly as Robin was saying, the way to look at it is you have 11 commissioners now, and I think if they are truly at large, it means that each region actually has 3 commissioners is the way to look at it. So we're not quite sure what the bill accomplishes, what it's supposed to accomplish, so that's a question we have. The other thing is right now the transportation commissioners are not specifically supposed to represent regions. They're supposed to think statewide. And by adding some that are at large, I think it actually forces them to think more parochially, the other 11. So those are just some comments that we've forwarded on, but there has been no, we haven't taken a position, and we'd have to look at that with the governor first. But those are just some comments that we had. So similar to what Robin was saying.
Okay. Nancy's where I was going next.
Yeah, we, as Robin and Deborah said, we have exactly those same comments, and so we oppose it at the moment the way it's written, and would have to see what changes they make to support it.
Okay, Doug?
Move to monitor with the expressions of concern as stated by the lobbyist.
Okay. Jim, did you have another comment before we take a vote?
Well, I actually oppose the bill, frankly. I don't think it's going to accomplish what we want to see accomplished. And I'd rather see it be opposed motion, but the motion was made to monitor.
Okay.
If I can speak to my motion?
Yes, Doug.
I think for the reason that Robin said earlier, to have the seat at the table, I think she makes an elegant point. You come out of the gate opposing, you have very little opportunity to address changes that might appropriately be made and might resolve the concern. Although I believe that it would be difficult to fix the draft that we see here, I nonetheless don't want to take a position that we would simply be completely unopen to discussion or dialogue. I think our lobbyist has excellent background information and skill at being able to express our deep concern over it without stating opposition initially.
Right. You know, the comment I would make is in the last two meetings at the STAC, some of the side comments, not in a direct presentation, that I've been involved in, some of those TPR, their commissioners that I think thought why we would oppose it. They were thinking that we'd get them somewhere, and the more that we talked, the less they thought that was actually going to accomplish it. So I'm not sure where this is headed either, because I think that was part of their original background is a numbers game, and that, like I say, I don't know that it gets them their answer either, so I'm not sure how much energy that has. I know Jack has some exposure to that too sometimes, so yeah, it's a mixed bag. Depends on who you talk to and on what day. So yes. Did you want to?
At the risk of beating a dead horse, I think that the comment in there that says it is Dr. Cogg's staff's observation this commission and previous commissions has done a good job of taking into consideration the interests of the whole state and making its decisions. I think you can read between the lines there as to what staff really thinks about this, and to add more people to the discussion probably dilutes the regional and Deborah's. I would not disagree with Deborah that the commissioners have been pretty strong ever since I've been here. At least we don't, even though we came from your area, we represent the entire state, which has always been a question to me. I don't really understand why you come from a certain portion of the state if you don't represent that portion of the state, but that's the way the commission works. So to add a couple more folks to it, I think further dilutes the region's influence in the state process.
Yes, Jackie?
I'm going to beat the horse too. I completely understand the reason to be at the table, but I don't see any way that this could be amended that would make sense for us other than we are going to continue to dilute the metro area's representation on this board. And I think we need to send the message that really from Dr. Cogg's position, that doesn't make sense for us as a larger entity. And if there was a way to modify it that I actually thought could make it neutral to Cog, I would say let's monitor and sit down. And I guess I agree with Jim's comments, and probably would oppose the motion because I want to oppose this, not monitor it.
Okay, Doug is the maker.
My concern is this. I don't know what else we might want from these sponsors in the future. And so rather than make a throwing down of the gauntlet at the beginning of the legislative session of opposing their bill, when we know what our staff will do and how they will argue it, and we know the positions we want them to end up with, and we know the difficulties with the bill, I think our statement can simply be monitor, and staff can take care of the working with these people, but I don't want to start throwing opposition to people when we may have need for them later on.
Okay, Nancy.
Well, then my question is, if we give you initially monitor and see if you can either kill it, because
I think he's getting that message pretty clear.
that we give you permission to oppose it, because if you can't, really, to me, your options are kill it or defeat it. So.
I guess I would say that my prediction would be we probably won't have to worry about it anyway.
Right. I think it's probably accurate. if we're only
well, because I didn't want to bias the conversation.
Okay. So we were anticipating the early demise of this bill, I guess, is what we're talking about from what I hear in the conversation in the room, and I think Rich has heard that fairly clearly. I haven't seen anyone step up to the plate and say otherwise. So with that in mind, we'll entertain a vote on that. All those in favor of that stance? Aye. Of monitor?
No.
There can't be any blood on your hands if you what? Yeah.
Is it?
Second, lady.
Is Nancy? Is that monitor it to death?
Right now we're monitoring, right?
Yeah.
That's probably a good idea. We'll see if we have anything. Okay, this is raising your one hand each. Aye. If you do not support us monitoring the bill, all those that are opposed monitoring, do you raise your hand high?
Well, can I make a, sorry, sir, I just need to make, the motion was to support monitoring, and what you've done is turn it into a negative motion. So I think the motion is all those in favor of the monitor position would raise your hand. Thank you.
Okay. Takes 2/3. In favor of monitoring. You are for watching it to death. What's that mean? Just to prolong the agony? We're at this point, I am.
I have enough affirmative votes then.
Okay.
I was pretty sure that was true. Okay, since we asked that to start, those opposed, raise your hands. Aye. One. These are the opposed. One. Yeah, if he said it, you're going to, that's it, Jackie. 1, 2. Yeah. Oh. Ooh. Okay, abstentions. Any abstentions? No? Okay.
Okay, the third and final bill that I have, Senate Bill 48, would authorize counties and municipalities to use HUTF funds for transit-related purposes. And I already see a hand up.
I don't think there's any questions or comments. Yes, Jack.
I would tell you, if there's anything about local control you ever wanted as a community, this is the bill that does it. So I will make a motion to support this bill.
That was Jack Gilbert.
Who seconded? Who?
You did hear that. You already heard that, yeah.
Somebody over here seconded. Who was it?
Who was the second that jumped out of the gate right away? Robin did.
They're fighting.
Shy and quiet Robin jumped right out in support also. Okay. And we have a comment. Yes, Rob.
I just wanted to comment that this has already gone through committee in the city of Aurora with overwhelming support. So I just wanted to make sure that it was on the record that Aurora does support this as well.
Well noted. You have another comment, Elise? Yes. If you were the only one, we would have had a nice little introduction for you, but it turns out you had 9 names.
I don't know how to work the mic. No, I wanted my first comments here to be supporting Commissioner Hilbert on a transit bill.
Absolutely. I was waiting for that.
Did you guys pose while I get that picture right now? All right. I guess it wasn't really a deep comment after all.
You did it. You caught me speechless. What can I say?
Which is a rare moment. Okay. Okay, we question's been called. All those in favor of supporting this Senate Bill 48, raise your aye. Those opposed? Abstentions? Pretty remarkable. Okay. Thanks, Rich.
I hope they all go that easily. That was great. I'll just add that next month there will be a whole bunch more bills, probably 200 or 300, probably 300 or 400 more bills introduced between now and then. We'll see what we have, but I'm anticipating significantly more bills to bring to you next month.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, next action agenda item is number 14 in your packet, to adopt a resolution amending the 2012-2017 Transportation Improvement Program. Todd Cottrell. Bill. For once, you get the early bus out of here.
Good evening. Before you this evening, we have 5 tip amendments for your action. The first 2 amendments, both with Region 1, including the surface treatment pool and the bridge on system pool, deal with one particular project, and that is the reconstruction of I-70 from Tower to Colfax. The first amendment for the surface treatment pool would add $7.5 million of surface treatment funds to fiscal year 13. And the second bridge on system pool amendment would add $7.9 million of state bridge on system funds, again in fiscal year 13. The total of these 2 amendments would bring $15.4 million to this single project. The third amendment before you is to amend the Faster Bridge Enterprise Pool for Region 6, and this simply adds $16 million of Faster Bridge funds to the bridge replacement of Havana over I-70. The last 2 tip amendments before you deal with one project again. Both of these are for the I-70 East EIS study. The first amendment would transfer $6 million of RPP funds out of the Region 6 design pool, and then it would transfer that into a previous project that Dr. Cogg's staff had set up for the East I-70 EIS study. Again, this was set up probably over 10 years ago. Anyhow, besides adding $6 million into that project, it would also add an additional $9.5 million of new RPP funds. This brings the total up to $15.5 million. Dr. Cogg's staff has also updated the prior funding just to show what the prior funds spent on this project were before fiscal year 12. And then it also shows the grand total of the project at $29.7 million for the study to date. With that, is there any questions that you may have on these tip policy amendments?
Any board members have a question, comment? Okay. Oh, Nancy?
I move.
Been moved by Nancy, seconded by Jackie. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Abstentions? Okay. That concludes our action agenda for the evening. Informational briefings, number 15 is going to be our water dialogue status report. Terry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Directors. I'm here to give you a briefing on the Water Dialogues project. This was outlined in MetroVision 2035, our adopted plan. There was a goal to reduce regional, per capita, municipal, and industrial water use in the region, working with various stakeholders, including municipalities. We partnered with Regis Institute for the Common Good. They interviewed over 20 stakeholders to get feedback. Many of your jurisdictions were involved in those interviews, your staffs, and also we had elected officials. And through that process, there was a committee brought together that we call the Process Design Team to further analyze the information. From that process, there was a recommendation to start to look at the land use connection in addition to water conservation, and to start to look at data related to that and how those align so that we can provide tools for jurisdictions. And we've been working diligently since that time to look for funding. It is up behind the timeline anticipated. We had hoped to have this complete by February of 2012. Fortunately, this delay has worked in our favor. We have the opportunity now to align with other regional initiatives that are going on. We have Colorado State University's Water Institute. We've now been named to their steering committee, in addition to a number of other key stakeholders, water providers, to look at this issue. And this way we can align with recommendations in the region and talk about the work that we've already done. We also are working with the Western Resource Advocates. They have garnered a grant and have formed a steering committee with groups such as DOLA and the various universities and their law operations here in the area to provide training on water. And so we're going to be aligning with that. And then we also have the Colorado Water Conservation Board that has pulled some data together, and we're going to be forming a team, many of the members that were involved with our process design team, to look at their data to see how we can capitalize on that and use it with our work here at Dr. Cog. So this really works out well for our timeline right now with MetroVision 2040. So we wanted to report on that and see if there were any questions that you had at this point in time.
Any board member have any question or comments this time? Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Terry, thank you for your presentation. Next on our agenda, Pat Cronenberger will talk to us about the Dr. Cog Board Workshop. You had some materials at your seat tonight when you came into detailing some of that and the agenda so far.
Good evening, Dr. Cog, board members. The topic memo really provides, I think, a good overview of what the board members who were involved in the planning for the workshop are trying to achieve, as well as the board officers. And I'll give the board officers an opportunity to talk about sort of galvanizing your participation. As Jennifer mentioned earlier, the registration for the workshop is going really well for this point in time. And it's really important that even if you're not planning on staying overnight in Colorado Springs, that you RSVP to Connie and let her know that you're going to be there, because she needs to account for the meals. The revised workshop agenda is at your seat. It's different from what is in your packet. And from a substance point of view, it's basically the same thing. We are not intending that there be a speaker Friday evening. There will be other things that will be going on Friday evening that should be equally interesting and fulfilling as far as team building and getting to know each other out of the third Wednesday night of the month, away from the press of business. The focus on the agenda is to really give you all an opportunity to talk about very important issues, what you believe is important in MetroVision 2040, and as well as the regional collaboration piece and your policies. What about them fosters collaboration? What does not? So this will be a great opportunity for you all to talk. And I'm concerned, is there a typo? Because I see a lot of people laughing. Is that okay? Oh, then it's something else. All right, I'm done. So questions, and other than that, I'll let the officers add, or anyone involved in the planning, speak if they wish.
Yes, Jack.
You know, I really would like to encourage everyone, if you can, to attend, because I'm going to tell you why I really think it's going to be important this time around. Take the 2040, okay, that's, frankly, we've done 20, 25, 20, 30, 20, 35, 24, but that's another issue. Just count by fives. But the thing that I think is going to be very critical for a lot of things all of us have been talking about, and that's item number 3. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're not at the table, your citizens and your policies are going to be putting your citizens on the menu if you're not there to help work these issues out. Some of the discussion points, I think, are going to lead us in the future on how we are going to arrive at, do we change the direction of the tip? I mean, when you consider MAP 21 and some of the other issues we're dealing with, the reduced funding, I think we're going to have to change the tip. What's that policy going to look like? MVIC, I mean, should we be reconstituting MVIC with a different direction, a different policy structure? This is the session right here that dictates, I think, a lot of the policy, the structure, and the direction that this board, in its current makeup, because we have a lot of new members, are going to want to take and commit to, and then be able to work forward, to work together with as we move forward. Because we do have a lot of questions that need to answer, like, really, I mean, what is the purpose of the MVIC and what are we doing? And this is where we can begin to have that discussion. So I plan on being there. I really hope I can get as many people there as you can. But if you don't, I have no problem voting for one and changing the tip policy. It's quite, no, just kidding. But thank you very much.
Jim.
Yes, I wanted to speak a little bit about the tip policy as well. Those of you who have been serving on this board for the past like 3 or 4 years know that we've come across some extra funding every now and then, and that has caused great consternation among this board and has split this board many different ways because they can't agree on how we're going to spend this extra money. We never have the time at a board meeting to sit down and hash it out, create a policy that we might be able to follow if extra money comes along. This is an ideal time to try to talk about that, because I think the TIP funding coming in the future is going to be critically important to us, and we need to have a very clear set of principles and objectives that we're going to be operating with over the next few years. And it includes not only the money that would come standardized to us through the federal or state government, but also those, if it happens to come again, little surprise packages we get every now and then of funding. So I agree with Jack. We really need to have board members there to have a thorough discussion to decide where we're going to go and create a policy that we can follow for the next few years.
Thank you, Jim. And Ron?
As a member of the Planning Committee, let me add a comment from another angle. I would urge you to come to get really a better knowledge of your fellow board members. When I first went to my first Dr. Cog orientation, frankly, I was turned off. It was not well done as far as I thought. But then shortly thereafter, I went to the first workshop and really got to know some people I probably would not have gotten to know otherwise the same way, and that experience has been, to me, invaluable ever since then. And that's been, how many years, Connie? 4?
4 years.
4 years, yeah. So it's, you know, even if you have to pay for it out of your own pocket, you know, particularly the smaller jurisdictions, and I'm a small jurisdiction, it's tax deductible under the current tax law, and it's well worth your time.
Thanks for that other fiscal advice there. Yeah, Robin?
So you guys set high expectations last year. I got to sunbathe with Kathy Noon and Jackie Millay. So I don't know how you're going to beat that. But I wanted to ask, back all the way to the dawn, sorry. We were fully clothed, just for the record. Just going back to the Don Hunt thing about the potential for Dr. Cog to accelerate and cash flow manage its funds differently, I think that would be a great conversation. If the staff, if the officers are in agreement, I would love to have the staff share with us what you think that would mean, what it would involve, and for us to be able to have some more in-depth, relaxed conversation about it at the retreat, since it seems to me to kind of connect to these other things, because it would create the same scenario Jim described. And I think it sounds like it is work intensive, which is a huge consideration for you given, you know, a pending retirement and other things. But it's a lot of potential money and so I would like us to have an in-depth conversation about that. So I don't know if you've already thought about the best time to have that, but it seems to connect to some of these other ideas.
Robin, I think that part of what previous comment from Jim came, the funding environment used to be more predictable, and you know, I was thinking back from 2005 or 2006, and it was pretty predictable and routine, and the process was different and fairly well defined. Then we got in an environment of ARA and son of ARA, and some other states didn't want their money, so they gave it to us. We had no problem taking it, but it wasn't always a pretty picture, and sometimes it got messy. But this board has been pretty good about making the decision that if you want to offer us funding in our area, we will find a worthy project to dedicate those funds to. The problem is the mechanism to make that happen is not well understood, and sometimes that changes fairly quickly, especially in our environment. So I agree with you. That's a real good use of our time, and officers have talked about that as being an important piece. Yes, Doug.
I just wanted to amplify a little bit on the comment.
No karaoke.
There will be Friday night. Of course there will be. But I did want to amplify on the social bonding that comes from the retreat. And if you can be there Friday so that you can have the opportunity to spend some time socially with some of your peers, it's amazing because it really does make these sessions work so much more productively and so much more effectively because we do have a sense of what you're thinking and where you're coming from, and it's a great opportunity. So really, to the extent that you can, I just want to encourage all of you, because I started doing it back in 2000 all the way through 2008 when I was term limited off, and it was a terrific opportunity to get to know people and therefore to work better with them on all of these issues in the future.
Yes. Jennifer.
To Robin's inquiry, I need to look into that a little bit deeper because I think that probably is pretty work intensive. It's my sense that what the planning committee and the officers and staff have thought was that these would be a little bit higher level discussions about what's working and what's not, and why aren't they working, and why are we just completely throwing policy out the door when things come along, or why is MVIC spending 2 hours debating and vetting and working on a recommendation only to come to the board to have the same discussion and making a completely different decision, which is extremely frustrating for those folks that are on MVIC. And so maybe kind of having a higher level discussion and identifying those things like this that you mentioned, if that's, is that a feasible option for DRCOG's staff? Go and look at that and tell us, come back and tell us. Give us, or let's talk about, how we put together the TIP and the criteria for that. And, I think it needs to be more flexible here or there, or we need to address this area or that area that we're not right now. And staff come back and give us some options to talk around and to chew on to see if we can come to a place where we feel that we can be more nimble and flexible and more less reactive and actually more ready to make decisions when unplanned opportunities come along. But I will talk with Steve and see what kinds of information we could have. I don't know that we'll have a lot of time to get into it, but I'll definitely see what we can do.
I think the comments made tonight concerning the interpretation of map 21 not being clearly defined is going to impinge on us getting to know each other, because we will be notified of what that interpretation is long after our board workshop, and that's going to continue to be that way. And that was my earlier comment about we are not going back to an environment that once existed. We can't use a previous style of doing things. So the only way we can make that change is if we sit down as a group and make that change. And if MVIC is not operating the way it should, in the board's view, we need to make some substantive change to that. Make it worthy of your time. We don't want to just make it a 2-hour meeting that gets replicated 2 weeks later. That does nobody any benefit. So those are things I think that we have discussed at some level, reacted to over the last year. Clearly, the year before it was mixed. It's time for us to do that, and it would only be effective if we had a great membership attendance at a workshop to do that. So it's an opportunity. Any further comments or ideas? Okay, moving on to 17. I know we've had kind of a long night, so I will take a look at some of the things that we're reporting on. The stack report that I have, a huge amount of that was already covered by Don in his talk tonight, and you guys brought up many important points, some of which came up directly and indirectly at the stack meeting. I might note that at that meeting that Steve had introduced an option 3 to their decision on how to deal with things, especially the funding mechanism that looks at MPOs. And the first and maybe one of the most obvious questions that sometimes never gets asked is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And that he brought up and highlighted what we all know to be true, that we talked about earlier. You have 5 MPOs that are 78% of the region's population. You've already heard that it's 2/3 of the economic engine. And what we get is 57, 58-ish amount of funding to deal with what we have going on. The other mechanisms, we're trying to vary that based on the fact that we are, 12 urban counties and 52 rural counties. And so, I mean, that's kind of the tension that's in the room when you're dealing with the state transportation group. And so what he was talking about is, and a specific example comes to mind, you think about the alt modes that we deal with, and that they've been redefined in MAP 21, and how that will be financed and how it will be funded, and what are the squishy areas where you might change some funding strategies. So some of them will be more limited in some ways, and will expand others. So that's an important issue for us to look at in that alt mode situation. If we went up to a statewide competition as far as funding for projects, what came out that was not clear statewide is that most of our alt modes are largely matched or overmatched every time we put one out. And that's not necessarily the default reaction we get statewide. That just means that we have to do more education. I mean, it's an ongoing process to let other folks know that if you're bidding, you're going to be bidding against Douglas County, who's going to bring in 60% of the project cost for the alt mode project that they have on the table. And when EADS wants to have an alt mode project, I don't know how you're ever going to think about measuring up. So to deal with that kind of a change in operation, I think Steve made a good case for maybe that's not a real good way to go about it. And it seemed like it was clear enough that most people went along with it. It wasn't a hard-line vote or anything, but that's the way that was. Don covered the asset management and ramp situation. We know that the faster funding has really benefited our MPO area, and the highlight is it's not because we are the big dog, it's because the big dog has a lot of failing bridges. You have 20% efficiency, 30%. And so if you haven't had a plan in the last 40 years to deal with them, we'd rather not go down the Minnesota plan, where you wait till after the collapses and people fall and don't make it. If that's your plan, it's not a plan. Yeah. So those are the things that I think that were important that we looked at. They're not sure about the rulemaking. They want to make sure that we're going to be a little more specific rather than being aspirational as far as goal setting, and that's probably a good thing for everybody. It's the same thing when we approach for funding changes, or even if we roll out projects. The public's more inclined to support something if they see a clear connection between what is going to happen with it than just trust me with the money. And so, the idea of shifting that from an aspirational approach to being a very specific approach is at the base of a lot of the thinking in MAP 21. And I think that's what we'll see as the rules kind of roll out. Those are some of the highlights, and Steve would like to emphasize anything else he thought went on that day. Yeah, I know he also has been attending the physical meetings, which is another whole issue. They're doing a lot more of the bookkeeping, looking at that, and I think that's probably a good result of what Don's been all about too. Ron?
On a related transportation item, how many of you have relatives in Wisconsin? Okay, we need you, and I'll tell you why. Chairman Schuster of the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure has just appointed the head of the subcommittee on highways and transit, kind of near and dear to our hearts, Representative Tom Petrie, I believe it's pronounced P-E-T-R-I, from Wisconsin. So we need to get warmed up to Wisconsin.
Good business. Green Bay or not, Green Bay or not.
Green Bay or not, right? Because if we can, we're already working with Schuster on some things, and including the Transportation Commission, Gary Reef, but it wouldn't hurt to begin to reach out to, so if anybody can think of a way to get Mr. Petrie here, it'd be good for all of us.
It's good insight, Ron. Thank you. Next committee report is from Sue Horn, who's not here, the Metro Mayor's Caucus. I know they had a retreat this last Saturday. I don't know if anybody wants some highlights. I know I looked at the 40, 60 pages. I didn't study it yet because I just got it this afternoon. But
well, the first thing is it was really great to have Mayor Hancock was with us virtually to the end of the meeting, and then he went on to try and lead a certain sports team to victory, but that didn't work. And
not so much.
And then God smited him and mowed him down with his ankle. Quadricep. Okay. But it was a good meeting. We talked a lot about transportation, but it really doesn't fit yet to come to Dr. Cog. But
right. It's trying to refine that.
We did elect a new chair, and that is Jim Gunning from Lone Tree. Note that Lone Tree is starting to make this move to take over.
Yeah, really. So just to follow up, basically just that was that we were working on our priorities. So, you know, it's our goal-setting retreat, just like everybody else's. So we worked on that. And certainly transportation and funding is a key discussion point.
Ground zero for you.
Yeah,
right.
So.
Got that. Thank you for that. Don, do you have any Mac? Or you have another?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that
yes.
Mayor Gunning had this program to do 40 cups of coffee, one with every mayor in the region.
Right.
It was kind of an aggressive plan, and I was pretty impressed. You know, I mean, can you imagine if Dennis had a cup of coffee with every single one of us in the room? I mean,
Pat's had more coffee than she wants to think about, you know.
We really should send him the movie because you need to click on the movie.
I actually caught my mayor having their coffee together with him, so that report will come out later. You go ahead, Donna. Sorry to interrupt.
I was just going to ask if that's 40 cups of coffee in just an afternoon, or is there a time frame that you put onto that? Well, no, it'll keep you going. As far as MAC, we nothing much to report at this time. Our meeting is actually this Friday. At Betcher Mansion in Jefferson County. We will have a new chairman of MAC this year and vice chair. Vice chair will be Nancy Sharp, I believe. And woohoo, go Arapahoe County.
Speaking of alt modes.
Pardon?
Oh.
The chair this year, well, let's just put Mac will be quite impressed with the chair this year. A dynamic individual who, you know, no, that's me. I'll be the chair this year, and so I'm looking forward to being chair and moving Mac forward. Thank you.
Thanks for being a key part of the last week in December for us too. You know, that was an interesting week. Okay, Cliff, AAA report for you.
Luckily, we had no meeting last month, so you don't have anything to listen to.
That's one of the easier reports, isn't it? The RAC, Jennifer.
Actually, my name is here probably because Will is no longer on the board. If Jackie or Joyce would like to get this report in the future, I'm happy to let you do it. Very happy to let you do it. At the RAC, there were some presentations on fostering electric vehicle expansion in the Rockies, called Project Fever for short. There was a presentation by Denver Metro Clean Cities Coalition, as well as CDOT, the City of Boulder, and some RAC staff. There was also the selection of a consultant to do the creative and marketing for RAC's Ozone Aware campaign. And there was also the staff proposed the work program for the RAC for the upcoming year, as well as the budget. And I don't know if, again, if Jackie or Joyce have anything to add to that. I don't. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Jim, you have a message from the MBIT?
From past reports, you may recall there are 3 subgroups that work for the implementation task force. One of them is on transportation station, which is dealing with first mile and last mile of getting people back and forth to the transit stops. Construction defects, the committee has raised a $20,000 match for a consultant that will help with state law having a negative impact on for sale multifamily units. And the third group was a land use and economic development group, and they're working on identifying case studies.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. You have an E470 report, Ron?
I've talked to Jim, and between us, we figured we'd save time and say nothing. Right, Jim?
Well, you became very popular suddenly. Yeah. The rest of the meeting packet is construed of informational items. You got a report of the nominating committee that you see the results there, and we will act on that next month. So you see what the recommendation has been to move that forward. Jim?
As a member of the nominating committee, I want to thank all of those people who did put their names forward. We had a number of people who wanted to serve in one capacity or another. So we appreciate all of that. It was a difficult decision for the 6 of us to come forth with who we wanted to recommend for being officers or on the administrative committee. So thank you to all those people who put your names forward.
Thank you, Jim, for that. The next 2 attachments are draft summaries of the MVIC and the admin committee meetings. And then 21 and 22. 21 is the MetroVision Planning Committee roster. You can take a look at the appointments there. And 22 is a report on the 2040 MetroVision Planning Development Initiative and the 2035 Implementation Task Force activities. Also some clippings that are relevant to our region in the back, if you think that. Next meeting will be February 20th. Does anyone else have something for the betterment of the board? Comments? Besides, we are adjourned? Oh, no. Bill?
I just want to welcome. I'm glad that I have this opportunity to participate as a board member here. And a little bit of history. I was on the Dr. Cox Citizens Advisory Committee for Transportation in 1978. So I may out.
Well, we haven't lost all institutional knowledge in that case, Bill. I'm glad to see that.
Jennifer was in kindergarten.